Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Grounded Seeker podcast, the podcast dedicated to supporting non dual seekers in emotional distress with integrating trauma and dysfunctional behavior to feel deeper authenticity, empowerment, and regulation through in depth root level solutions. My name's Sam, and this is episode 11. In this episode, I go into a really important topic that is quite triggering. However, on the other side of it, leaves us with the potential for true transformation if we really let this in. So in this episode, I go into a sort of like really vulnerable aspect of myself to really drive the point home that, I'm still doing this work. And I hope that you can relate to my experience in some way and use it as a way to encourage deeper transformation in your experience. And I also go and start with a little bit of theory into how we can have deep compassion for ourselves during this process, even though it can be very triggering for us. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I think it's a really valuable one, a really important one if we're interested in, deeper authenticity, empowerment, and regulation of our system. And if we really let it in, it can significantly shift our consciousness. So enjoy this episode. So this is a really tender subject, and I put trigger warning in the title for a reason, right? We're choosing suffering to stay safe, and that might be obnoxious to say, and you might even be wanting to, kind of almost like a little bit angry at me. I know especially if you're feeling a lot of distress, hearing a message like that could be very like, what the fuck are you talking about, Sam? I'm not choosing suffering. I want to get out of suffering. And I get it. I remember the first time I heard this sort of message from Scott Killaby, who's really shaking the spiritual seeking paradigm in a great way and has unveiled a lot of really great things about emotional repression and how it feeds into the shadows of spirituality. When I first heard Scott Killaby point out that we're choosing suffering, I thought the same thing. I was like, oh, what are you talking about, dude? Although there was some part of me that intuited that I think he's onto something. And then I saw over and over again in my direct experience that he was correct. We choose suffering. We are choosing suffering. Although I would rephrase it in a way that is less invasive to our parts, because I notice that if we sort of like take on this attitude of, oh God, now I'm even choosing my suffering. I'm choosing my suffering. We can beat ourselves up even more, or we can feel threatened by people who challenge our current paradigm, and that's not what I want to sort of put forward at all. I think it's really important that we honor our psyche and really meet ourselves in our current state with a sense of deep compassion and gratitude for just, of course, we are this way. We develop this way. If you watch my previous episode where I made an analogy right at the start in the first 20 minutes on episode 10, how the reason we suffer is because we have a core pain or a core exiling, sort of a deeply wounded area of our psyche. And then I use the analogy from my teacher that I'm currently doing a training with, Dr. Tori Olds. We have this core pain, and then what we have is all of these different parts diving on top of that pain. So if I feel hurt when a bully attacks me, then that's the initial wound. So then I have like a football player dives onto that wound to sort of protect it, right? That hurt that I feel. So maybe that first football player is really angry at the bully and fights back. And then we get, maybe like in this example, a teacher gets upset at us, like, don't be angry at him, like don't hit him. So then another football player dives on top of the original hurt and then anger, and basically says, okay, I can't be that angry. So then we get really nice. When people make, inclinations toward bullying us, we get really nice instead of being really angry and defending ourselves, right? Basically, if we use the language of internal family systems, there are no bad parts in our experience. So even dysfunctional behaviors at the most superficial presenting layer, even if it's like when someone gives us a compliment and then we actually get really defensive or something, like, I don't want your compliment. Even though that may be dysfunctional, it actually serves a perfect purpose. It's completely coherent. It makes sense that it's arising. So I really think that we need to be careful with like coming at this with this vindictive attitude of that we're choosing suffering and almost like casting blame on us, further blame on people who are already suffering with trauma, that we need to, just be gentle with it, but also have a firmness there as well. We need to actually call out the ways in which we are really deceiving ourselves into staying safe through playing out a victim role. I'm suffering so much and I just try everything and I can't get it. I just can't get it right. We have to be ruthless in some sense to really see how we're deceiving ourselves and actually choosing to play out that victim role, and simultaneously be very deeply compassionate to understand that we developed this protective layer in our consciousness, this like hurt, victimhood, this wounding for a reason. Okay, and if we want, we actually can change that if we're willing to. And we might say on the surface that we want to do that, but then when we actually check our nervous system, we see, oh no, I do not want to do that. For example, say with social anxiety, we might say, I don't want to be socially anxious. I want to heal that. But then when we face the reality and we actually dive into that emotion, this is called a symptom deprivation in the world of experiential therapies. If you imagine yourself right now, if you had something like social anxiety, and you say, yeah, I want to get rid of this social anxiety. And then what you do is you imagine a scene where you imagine that you are deprived of the symptom, so you don't have social anxiety anymore. And you put yourself in that scene. Okay, I don't have social anxiety anymore. What would that feel like? And you just you make the assumption, well, I can do this. Like, what would it feel like if I didn't have social anxiety? And you might notice that, actually, hold on, the nervous system, it doesn't want to let go of that. There's a certain safety in the social anxiety. It's like you put yourself in that scene, so you can pause the podcast right now if you want to, or imagine a different thing that's more applicable to you. Like, let's say you have trouble with anger. Okay, can you imagine yourself not being angry and being in a scene where you otherwise would have gotten angry? And you feel, yeah, whoa, okay, I don't want to let go of that anger, or I don't want to let go of that social anxiety. So that's what I mean when I say we're choosing suffering. We're acting out protective mechanisms. And we say intellectually that we want to let go of these parts of us. We want to integrate social anxiety, if I could speak. And we're also saying we want to let go of our anger issues, or we want to say that we want to let go of our freezing up when we are put on the spot in a group setting. But then what we do, and I'm going to explain a personal story to really illustrate this point in a deeper way from my own experiences, so I can continue to share more authentic sides to me. I really want to dispel a lot of, especially with my avoidant attachment. I've previously tried to sort of dance around uncomfortable things and sharing uncomfortable things. So I'm open to sharing something that's really going to illustrate this point. But what we do is we choose that pain. We choose it. We sort of this sucks so much. I don't like this. This is happening. And then when, we don't do the inner work to then process and see what's really going on there, that's driving that behavior. And in a sense, we continue to choose that behavior because it's familiar. We can predict how we will engage in that situation based upon that dysfunctional behavior. And we haven't died in the process. And the brain loves familiarity. So we continue to play these patterns out, even though they may be deeply hurting us, driving dysfunctional patterns in relationships, causing a lot of internal pain. But ultimately, they are safer than the alternative. Like if you really took on that exercise I did before of a symptom deprivation, of stepping into the scene and imagining yourself without your dysfunctional behavior, and you really do that slowly, you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about here, that we're choosing suffering, okay? We're choosing to be safe. So let me tell you a story of my experience, and it relates to YouTube actually and content creation. So when I first started YouTube back in, I think around like 2020, I was pretty early into my spiritual path. And I'd just done, at this point in my life, I was struggling with engaging in the workforce. I had a lot of schemas that were at play that I developed through early childhood around sort of like imposter syndrome of being like some degree like pretty incompetent in the workplace. And because I had a lot of like traumatic events happening when I was younger in workplace scenarios and working with like teams and these sorts of things that really like punished me when I made mistakes. I was a part of a lot in a lot of like toxic workplaces and stuff where you make one mistake wrong and the whole workplace would sort of like start gossiping about your mistake or something. And, you know, you find out behind your back that everyone's been talking about you when you made this mistake or something. So these sorts of experiences were really happening for me earlier on in my early adult years and, my teenage years as well. So feeding into my adulthood. So, and this was around the time that COVID had hit. And thankfully in Australia, it was a great time for me to sort of like turn inward and focus in on my spiritual path more, because even the government was compensating people for essentially not working. So I was getting an income as well from the government, and I was able to start this YouTube thing. And I had this idea at that time that I wanted to build it into something that I was deeply passionate about, that I could maybe even turn into a business to earn some income in some way. And I didn't even really know how I was going to do that, but I was grateful to be out of the workplace scenarios that I was in, where I didn't have to engage with all of this like conditioning, basically, that was very anxiety and freeze inducing on my system. So it was much easier and exciting actually to isolate myself using COVID as sort of like a bit of a leveraging point to then focus in on my building this business that I didn't really know. I just knew I wanted to not feel that pain of the workplace anymore. And I wanted to deepen my spiritual practice and maybe share some things on the way that would help people and then turn it into a business in some way, shape or form. Right. So I started researching, like, how do you make a good YouTube channel? How do you grow a channel? And essentially, how do you make a good video? How do you make a viral video, or all these sorts of things? So you'll notice if you look at my channel and you click on my icon and you go to my page and you look at my videos and then filter for the most popular videos, some of them are actually quite successful. Like I've got a couple, I think, that are over 100,000 views. Because in that early phase, I was really focusing in on content like viralocity, like having like viral content to grow my YouTube channel, right? And I succeeded in that. And in a sense, I'm quite proud of that. Like I really did do my research, and I really essentially I made it work, right? There's a couple of videos like my Vipassana experience. There's one video where I talk about how I have changed through meditation and all these sorts of things. Now, okay, so in that period, I was basically in survival mode. This is the key thing. I wanted to make YouTube work. Now, why did I want to make YouTube work? Well, because I didn't want to go back to the workforce, right? And because I was focused on virality and sort of vanity metrics, or not, in a sense, vanity metrics, but really just I was doing the best I knew how to grow a channel, like following guides, these sorts of things. I wanted to just grow this thing, but at the expense of my authenticity. The expense of my authenticity. So you'll notice if you watch those older videos, you'll detect probably if you're attuned and you're aware, you'll notice that, my energy was so different there. I was so like in your face and how to transform your life and all this sort of stuff, and like very edited content as well, highly edited content. And yeah, it was like pretty painful. When I look back on those videos, in a way, just knowing the consciousness of that persona that I was putting forward and how much suffering was sort of driving that, it's pretty difficult for me to even like watch those videos now, because in fact I don't even watch them, because they're just sitting there because they sort of attract spiritual people in, and I leave them up because they're sort of like show a bit of my journey through the years as well. So I'm happy to leave them up. But they do reflect a period of like pretty inauthentic expression for me at that time. Okay, so this is all going to make sense. I'm going to tie this into how I'm choosing suffering, but I just want to sort of give a bit of a really deep background. Now, because the whole necessitation of me to create content, essentially, right, because I was avoiding wanting to go back to the workplace from these schemas, these emotional learnings that are quite painful for me, I really like doubled down on this inauthenticity and this sort of like content creation machine or engine that I was trying to build. And I really had this sense of urgency. Like, I need to create these videos. Like, I need to do this. I don't even know why, but I just need to make these videos happen so that I don't have to go back to the workplace. I just got to do this. Although I wouldn't have even used that language at that point. Like, I need to do this. Like, it was just like, there's just like an anxiety feeling in the body. Like, I'm just make it happen. Make it happen. Do the video, make it happen. Even at the expense of your authenticity, just make it happen. Okay, now let's fast forward. So years later, even like a year ago, or even up until very present day, actually, and I'll explain. This unraveled for me quite recently, so which is why I'm sort of bringing this up as an example. But I started to notice that as I was shooting videos in a more like authentic way, less editing and these sorts of things, I started to notice that even though I would try to be authentic, I still had the conditioning in my body that wanted to be unauthentic. So as I was shooting these episodes, like podcast episodes and these sorts of things, I would notice that as I was talking, the more I would talk, it was igniting all of those old emotional learnings from when I first started YouTube into a sense of deep contraction in my body. Like, it felt like twisted steel in my body. The more that I talked, the more that it elicited all of these painful emotional learnings. So I would just be talking and expressing myself normally, and then there would be all of these emotional learnings coming in simultaneously that were saying, like, be inauthentic, make the video sound good, do it, make sure you sound good, make sure you sound good. And then even like later judgments that were coming online as I started to grow more, like probably 1 or 2 years into creating content, right? Because if we use that analogy, it's like football players diving onto the ball, right? So initially it was get away from the workplace, and then it was be really good at presenting at the expense of your confidence, and then there were even further layers that added onto that later on that it was sort of like punishing the fact that I was being inauthentic. And they would be saying things like, through anger, you're being so inauthentic, dude. Shut up. Stop talking. Stop talking. And then I noticed, so as I kept sort of like creating content and this sort of emotional material was going unresolved, the more that I tried to step into just like authentically speaking, I couldn't do it, because it was just like, I would start talking into the sort of like creating a video or something or a podcast episode, and my voice would just lock up. Like I would just feel this like angry, frozen tightness that would get worse and worse the more that I kept speaking. And this was quite actually recent where I really dove into this. And hopefully it's a testament to that this work actually works as well. Like this somatic work that I encourage and that I support people with. Let this be like a example like of one of the ways in which it can really unravel. So okay, I noticed that this behavior was going on, and I realized that okay, this can't keep going on. I'm just like it's pre-verbal stuff that's happening, and there's a lot of pain in my system, and it's making it very difficult for me to even engage in wanting to create content, because like every time I shoot an episode, it's like I'm taking a pill of mercury poisoning or something. Like I'm just like my whole body gets locked up, and then I experience this pain for like a significant amount of time. So I don't even want to create episodes anymore. So you'll notice, like even with podcast episodes, there's been big gaps sometimes in the release of certain episodes because this emotional content was so painful that it really inhibited. It was like the bottleneck that stopped me from producing this sort of content. So just actually quite recently, instead of really just sort of like gritting my teeth and shooting an episode, what I did was I brought my own tools and the sorts of strategies that I encourage people to use and I work with people with. I brought my own tools to deeply understand and dissect exactly what was going on in this experience. So I almost instigated what we would call revivify. So I would start shooting a podcast episode, or I didn't even need to start the podcast episode or the video. I would just even think about that. I would think about doing it, and then I would notice straight away, okay, my body is locking up into that familiar state of being, and it felt deeply uncomfortable, right? Just like a numb tension through my body. And instead of, again, brute forcing my way through that, I really sat with that pain, really sat with it. And I created a lot of resource around it, just with this attitude of, hey, I know you do not want me to look at you, but I'm gonna sit with you, buddy, until I understand what you have to tell me. Because this energy, right, it had a very forward-leaning energy. It's like, just get the podcast done. Just make sure you sound good. Just do it and get it done from those early emotional learnings. So it almost was resistant at first for me to even meet it and just sit with it. Because A, it was deeply painful, and B, the nature of the emotional learning and schema was one to just sort of lean in and jump ahead and just make sure I get the thing done. So as I sat with this part of me, and I really sat with it, like for over an hour, and I gave it so much resource and attention, and used all the skillful inquiries that I would usually employ, like emotional repression inquiries and all sorts of inquiries that I can go into in a future episode to really how we can unravel these things. I started to realize that, okay, following this back, tracing this back, okay, yes, I feel like I don't want to speak because let me pull this apart. Oh yeah, okay, I feel really angry at myself, like I'm angry. And then I would allow myself to experience the anger, like, fucking shut up, Sam. Like, shut up. I hate the way I'm so inauthentic. And then I tied that back even further. So it's just layer after layer. Healing happens when resource meets need. Really letting that anger express. And it didn't even feel like anger, by the way. It felt like sort of like a numb, sort of like mild frustration that felt like sort of twisted. But then as I added logs to the fire of the anger and kept expressing it, like, yeah, I'm angry, then it would grow. Like, I'm really angry. And I could push it against the wall and release it, right? It's like, okay, I've given that part of me space. And then what was it protecting underneath that? Oh, it was protecting the fact that I feel inauthentic. And then I got to express myself in this perfect way so that people on the receiving end of the spiritual video that I put out don't sort of perceive me as being someone who is like lacking confidence or something. So it was this sort of like overcompensation. Make sure you sound really good so the video comes out well, so you can get more virality and views to grow your channel. And then, I won't go into all the layers, but there was anger and other layers that were there and like this deep need. But ultimately, what it came back to again was I need to make this video perfect so that I don't need to go back to the workplace, so that I don't realize that deep down I'm a failure. And being able to meet that part of me, what in internal family systems they would call the exile, or in AEDP experiential therapies they would call the core affecting wound of being a failure, who couldn't stand up for himself in the workplace, who couldn't get angry. So there was actually even more anger repression work that was there from these initial wounds, where in the workplace, when people got angry at me or like vibed to me that I was a piece of shit for not being able to get the task done, I can stand up for myself. Like I could like re-experience those events as the failure who could then stand up for himself. That allowed that part of me to integrate. So this is the beauty of this work, right? On the surface, I had this presenting symptom. I had this presenting symptom of tightness in my body when I would go to shoot a podcast episode or a video or something, right? This tightness, this really strong tension in the body. And in a way, I was choosing that tightness and tension because it was essentially keeping me safe from not having to feel inauthentic, not having to feel the pain of that earlier emotional aspect of self that I experienced in earlier years. So I was choosing to not shoot the episodes because then I would have to experience the inauthenticity and risk criticism from others on the other side of who are watching the video. Does that make sense? See how I in a way, my nervous system was choosing to not do the desired thing that I actually wanted to do, to share like what I believe to be my calling is to like do this work. I didn't want to do that thing because my nervous system, even though like overtly I would say, yes, I want to create content, my nervous system said, hell no, you don't want to experience that inauthenticity and be perceived negatively by other people as well. So my nervous system chose that over creating content. And then there was also other emotional learnings in there, like I need to create content as well, which sort of like unraveling and untangling all of those parts by giving them a voice sort of helped me really unravel that. But I hope you get the point. So, and then as I really unraveled that, I really met that core pain and I reworked it through the skillful evidence-based approaches that I would do with people, facilitating them. What I noticed is like that pain, that twisted steel that I was experiencing is pretty much gone. There's still work that I need to do. Like I still feel in my body a little bit actually as I'm speaking that there is some sort of tension. But I just know that like, yeah, I'll just keep looking there, I'll keep looking and I'll keep unraveling these parts gently, slowly but surely. Because it's just brick by brick by brick. You use the tools, you go out and you live your life and then you experience a trigger and then you integrate that trigger. And then slowly but surely, all of those like contracted and fragmented aspects of self that are driving even your most core dysfunctional behavior learned in childhood start just gently falling away. And what comes forward is a loving self energy that is unburdened by all of these parts that can be its authentic self. That can be more authentic, right? Because that's what really gets in the way of a lot of our dysfunction is all of these parts that have been layered on to protect ourselves from really deep suffering that we don't want to experience. So I hope that gives you a clearer picture and gives you like a bit of insight into my life as well and these sorts of things. Like I'm still human. I have all sorts of conditioning that I'm still working through. All right. So, yeah, where are you choosing suffering? It can be, again, really helpful to do an exercise of symptom deprivation. Imagine you didn't have the suffering that you're currently experiencing. Put yourself in that situation as if you didn't have it, and then just notice, oh yeah, no, I don't. I really want to hold on to this. And then you can just gently like allow that part of you, like, oh yeah, okay, you really want to hold on to this suffering. Yeah, I get it. It's protective in some way. And then you can ask it something like, oh, what's it getting for me to do and hold on to this pain? Oh, if I don't let go of this social anxiety, or if I do let go of this social anxiety, then I'll have to be more expressive. And when I was expressive earlier on in my life, I got shut down so many times, and I couldn't bear to feel that pain again. So I need this social anxiety so I don't get expressive and people shut me down again, right? It's very coherent. It makes a lot of sense. There are some other examples I can give as well, just to really hone this in for you. Okay, so let's give the example of the non-dual seeking identity, the person who's resting as awareness all of the time and just sort of taking on this attitude of everything is so peaceful and so loving. And then, I'll give an example at a retreat. I was at a Vipassana retreat. This sort of attitude was playing out for somebody. And I remember seeing this. It's like somebody gets angry, and then the retreat attendees sort of saying, oh, may he be happy. May he be free from suffering. This poor man who's getting angry. And then, but actually underneath this expression of what looks to be loving and caring is that these people are essentially feeling like, oh, I fucking hate how people get angry. I hate it's so disgusting, and I do not want to be like him. So really, this superficial on the surface level, there's this kind, compassionate spiritual identity, but underneath that, and the truth of it is that identity exists because maybe earlier on it had a really troubling relationship with anger, and it's terrified of experiencing or expressing anger. So that what it actually does is it tries to snuff out anger in other people by getting them and onboarding them essentially to be really lovely and kind and happy and friendly, right? So you can see how this spiritual identity of being nice and loving actually keeps us safe from coming into contact with our anger and like really expressing anger and allowing ourselves to just express our authentic self in that way. So that one I know can be quite triggering for people as well. So just really taking on that approach of compassion if these sorts of things are arising, and just be gentle with yourself. Like, oh, is that true for me? Or am I getting defensive and just like sort of dismissing this, and I want to click off this episode all of a sudden, and just being mindful. Oh yeah, okay. Wow, look at that. Another example. Someone says something like, oh man, I'm really suffering so much. And then this suffering, there's like a holding on to this suffering, almost like wearing it like a badge of honor to some degree, like a sort of really, really clinging to this sad and depressed sort of state of being. And they might say overtly, like, yes, I want to get rid of this depression. I don't want to be depressed. And then actually, when push comes to shove, when we dive into such a sensation, just compassionately and like, okay, yeah, this I understand. It makes sense that you're presenting with this symptom. It's here for a reason. Let's really meet this part of you. Let's really just sit this depressive part down on our lap and look to understand it and offer it a lot of love and compassion. And okay, so then we might ask, what's it getting for you to be in such a depressive state? Oh, it gets me like a sort of get out of jail free card where I don't need to engage with my worldly responsibilities. And actually, the fact that I'm suffering so much, it carries with it a sense of like specialness, of uniqueness. Like I'm entombed with this feeling forever, and I'm sort of like feeling like a bit of a victim. And what that gets for me is compassion, like from other people. It gets me pity. It gets people to support me, so I get love through that process. So it's like, yeah, wow, okay, what a creative and wonderful part that was designed to get compassion, right? So in a sense, we're choosing to remain depressed. There's a part of us that's protecting us to get our needs met through maybe like somewhat of a maladaptive way that's causing us pain, but it does have some utility as well. So it's really valuable to be able to see this and just have this sort of cutthroat approach, that gentle firmness that I'm talking about. Like, yes, let's meet it with such deep loving compassion. And let's also just be honest, like, wow, yeah, okay, it's actually getting me something. And through that process of ruthless inquiry, we actually are opening ourselves up to the possibility of more authenticity in joy and like empowerment and regulation. And that might be scary for us because, maybe we've been running these identities for so long in our lives. Like they're so entrenched in who we take ourselves to be that we actually don't want to let go of them. So it's like, yeah, just being gentle. Maybe you don't need to let go of it overnight, and you definitely don't need to beat yourself up over it. But we can have like a bit of an awakening there where it's like, holy shit, yeah, I've been choosing this. And I could keep choosing it. I mean, it definitely gets me something. So, maybe I do want to keep that. But if we're interested in like authenticity and being our authentic self and almost like not manipulating people around us into getting our needs met through these maladaptive ways, we might gently incline the mind slowly over time to unravel that and maybe see like, oh, then I can actually open up to more joy. Wow. Okay, so I hope that makes sense for you, and I hope you've gained a bit of insight today from this episode. If you want to work with me, check out the links in the description. We can do a clarity call to see if we're a good fit to work together, and sign up to the newsletter as well if you want more. I'm going to release a 90-day intensive program where I'm going to go really deep into this stuff with people as well. So check that out. And otherwise, much love to you. Hope you're taking care of yourself. Have a great day.